Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Mike Papp's Golf Chat Live. We have a very special guest tonight. He's a former five-time PGA Tour winner, Ken Green, and he's going to share the compelling story of his life inside and outside the ropes. If you think you know Ken, the man, think again, as this is not based on a true story, folks. This is the real story about the man that lived it and then survived it. It's quite a story. So welcome to the show, Ken. Thanks for being here with us tonight.
How's it going, Mike? What's new?
Well, we're going to have some fun tonight, that's for sure. We got some information you'd like to share, and we're very excited about this. I know we've got a lot of feedback and a lot of shares. A lot of people are going to be checking in with us tonight, and
they're curious about my one leg. You know, they love to see it.
Yeah, and what you could do with it too.
Absolutely.
I saw today that the Connecticut Open Senior, you did pretty darn good in that.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I shot 67, 74, finished fourth, and it was actually kind of a retro, because it was like I was a one putt machine.
Yeah,
it was back like I was 27 again, and it was it's kind of fun to have one of those days every once in a while. And every golfer out there knows what I'm talking about, when all of a sudden they have those days where they're not there. They're out of body, so to speak, and then but I can't complain. Anytime I shoot under par these days, I'm tickled pink.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't be? Okay, so let's get started, Ken. And I always say this to our viewers out there. This is going to be a very special interview. We always say this; it's kind of obvious, but give us all the hearts you can. We're going to be giving our hearts out today, and then don't forget to put your comments in, because we love to hear about them. Okay. So, Ken, we're going to start with how you began the game. And I mean, you and I grew up in the same caddy pen, and I just assumed that you were in Danbury your whole life, and that you played golf at Danbury High School the whole time. But that's not true at all. And I was a lot younger than you, and I only met you for one season. My brothers and I got dropped off at Ridgewood Country Club. We didn't even know about golf. I just do remember you sitting across the caddy pen with your bucket cap on, reading a newspaper, and you're very quiet. And so
I'm actually impressed I read.
What's that?
I'm impressed I was reading something.
Oh, sure. You always had the newspaper open. And then at the end of that season, you went out there and qualified for the Connecticut Open at Ridgewood Country Club, and you beat all the pros with a 70. And then I started realizing, hey, this guy's somebody. So let's start off at the beginning. Your family moved to Honduras the summer of 1970. Well, you were
obviously, I didn't know at the time why, but my father had a pretty bad drinking problem, and my mom thought it was a good idea if she went somewhere that maybe there wouldn't be a whole lot of, Americans, people that necessarily drank, and maybe could save him and the marriage at the same time. Unfortunately, there's drinkers find drinkers, and it didn't really help, but that was the reason. I mean, all I remember about it was when my mom told me we were going to Honduras, I just thought we were like moving down the road somewhere. When you're 11 years old, you have no clue where Honduras is, much less, Central America, and a country that's, even a little behind us, so to speak.
Right. And you said you were an athlete, but there were no baseball, football, soccer. So
no, I mean, obviously I was doing all the sports, playing as a kid up here, and, doing, without bragging, I mean, I was pretty coordinated. But when I got there, I wasn't allowed to play any of their sports because I was American.
Right.
And, so that eliminated the baseball and the basketball. And, of course, they didn't have American football. They had soccer, which, quite honestly, we hadn't even heard of back in 1970. And so really the only option for me to do anything was to play golf. And my dad joined a little 9-hole private golf course that, if lucky, might have been 2,700 yards. But it was perfect for a young kid to grow up on. It was ideal.
So you got your hands on some clubs, and
yeah, that was how it is. And it's kind of weird. I might be one of the few individuals that can honestly say I've represented two different countries. I think it was the second year that we were down there. The Central American Golf Association had their first ever junior golf tournament, and the country of Honduras couldn't come up with the 5 supply players they needed. So they allowed me, I think it was a temporary citizenship, and I got to represent the country of Honduras in Managua, Nicaragua. And so, I got to represent them. And then, many, many years later, I represented the United States in the Ryder Cup. So it was kind of a unique twist of luck.
Right. And you actually won your first tournament down there as a junior golfer.
Yeah. It was, I don't want to brag or anything. It just, I got lucky, and it just happened, so to speak. But they were all even newer to the golf than I was at that time, down there, and so everybody was just brand new spanking kids, basically.
Right, and we talked about this. You were self-taught. You didn't have any instruction, so it was all on your own.
Yeah, I just kind of mimicked golfers that were down there. I remember always watching. There was a pro down there. All I remember is his name was Enrique, and I just kind of mimicked his golf swing because he had the best swing of them all, and just did it myself, and just basically lived on the golf course. And the first year we were down there, we lived probably, could have been more than a quarter of a mile, half a mile. So I walked there every day and just stayed there until it got dark and walked home. And that's what I did for the first year. And that's where I really started playing more and more golf.
Okay. Yep. I know it had to be better than Sunset Hills, but we used to, originally we used to carry our clubs.
It's pretty close. I got to be honest with you, because I played a lot of golf at Sunset Hills in Brookfield. But the one in Tegucigalpa it's pretty close.
Okay. All right. So in 1972, you and your mom got headed back to Connecticut, right?
Yeah, I was down in Honduras for 3 years. I stayed down an extra year, and then I got back to. At that time, my mom was in Woodbury, Connecticut, and so I went to high school the first 2 years at Naniwag in Woodbury, and it was fun. I mean, I was the #1 player as a freshman, which meant I basically got my tail kicked every match the first year. But it in retrospect, that's probably a better thing, because if you've got any sort of competitive spirit in your body, when you keep getting beat up, you're either gonna keep getting up and fight on, or you're gonna go run away. And I'm the more of the keep fighting back theory, so it worked out good. And then after 2 years, as luck would have it, my mom was working 3 jobs to kind of keep us afloat, so to speak. So she'd get home really late from working at the diner. So we would oversleep, and for various other reasons, I didn't sleep very well. So we were late a lot, probably at least every other day. So my mom moves to New Milford, which is about, 15 miles from Woodbury. But we used my brother's address because I didn't want to move schools. And I started driving. So the first 2 days I was on time, and I was pretty excited. And then the next day I walk into school, and the principal sees me, walks up to me, and he goes, "Hey, Mr. Green, how are you?" I said, "I'm fine." He says, "How you doing?" All that kind of stuff. This is good. And he says, we have come up with a solution for you. And a solution for what? Well, for your tardiness. You are late way too often. I said, "Okay, what's that?" He goes, "Well, for every 2 days that you're late, we're going to dock you 1 golf match." So I'm like, "Okay." I said, "Are you really serious about this?" And he goes, "Yes." So I do the math real fast. We play about 15 matches a year. That's 30 times. If I'm late 30 times, I don't play a match. And I asked him one more time, "Are you serious?" And he goes, "Yes." And I just handed him my books and walked out. And I never saw Naniwag again. So, and then I quit school, and my mom would say, "Well, what are you going to do now?" I'm like, "Well, I'm going to turn pro, and I'm going to be a golf pro." Now, little did I know I was nowhere near good enough at that time, but when you're 16 and lost like I was, probably, who knows? But then they send me out to my dad, who at this point was in Arizona on a Indian reservation, taking care of. He was now the principal of the school system out there. I went out there and went to school for 2 days. Came home one day and told my father I'm not going back. It was just the kids weren't very receptive. One, I was white and the only white, and worst of all, I was the principal's son. So you can imagine how those first 2 days went.
Right.
And so I literally didn't do a thing for half the year. And if it wasn't, in all honesty, the connections my father had, being in the educational system in Danbury, they got the Danbury system to allow me to go back to school in Danbury and not have to make up the year, the half a year that I lost. So that's how I ended up in Danbury. I went to Danbury in 75, January of 75, and then finished out high school there.
Great. Yeah, we were just, I don't even know if I was in high school when 1974. So that's why you kind of disappeared, and I didn't see you anymore until you were older and actually started to play some professional golf, and you come back to Ridgewood. Okay, so that brings us to Palm Beach Junior College. After you graduated from Danbury High School, tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, junior college was. I went there basically because of Bob Clowen, who was the head pro at Ridgewood,
Yep.
And I wasn't good enough and didn't have the scholastic honors to get into a quote 4-year school at that time. So he suggested Palm Beach Junior College, and I went down there, and it was a great learning process because I once again was able to find out where I stood with everybody else. In Danbury, I had gotten to the point where I was one of the better ones in high school. And then when I went down to junior college, I realized that I was still far ways to go, that these kids were so much better than me. And that first year, it was again a learning process. You gotta get better, and I worked at it and kept working at it. And the second year, I got much better. I won, decent amount of golf tournaments, and was supposed to go to Troy State in Alabama, and had a really good spring and won a bunch more tournaments. And University of Florida contacted me and gave me a scholarship to go there. So I went to University of Florida from there.
So then you told me a story that you got your scholarship money up front, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, I had a good year. We had a great year as a team. We won like 7 tournaments out of 14, which is phenomenal. And but I wasn't real thrilled with some of the games the coaches were playing with the players. I wasn't one because I was playing well enough. But so I decided that I was going to turn pro. I played one event before school started with the school. Flew down to Gainesville, Florida, where the school is, and went and got my scholarship money, which back then they paid most of it in cash, and then you went and paid all your fees and stuff. So I took that money and basically used it to sponsor myself on the JC Goosey Mini Tour, and they since stopped that policy, by the way. I guess I woke up the alarm system there, but it's so they're partly responsible for my career.
And then from there, you said you went on to Q school.
Yeah, I mean, then
Q school.
You continue. Back then, you have the Q school, and it took me 2 years to finally get through it. And in the fall of 1981, I finally got through the Q school in Houston, Texas, and then we started up in 1982 was my first year, which was the last year of what they call Monday qualifying. Anybody that's not our age probably doesn't even remember that only the top 60 kept their card way back when, and the rest had to go through Monday qualifying. And if you made a cut, you played the following week. And if you didn't make the cut, you had to go do the qualifying. And then I believe Gary McCord came up with the concept of a top 125. And so they went from the top 60 to the top 125 as to who keeps their card. And then so it was kind of unique that I got to see both ways. The Monday qualifying, which I had to do quite a few of them, and one day the Monday qualifying might only have 5 spots, and then the next week there might be 25 spots available.
Refresh my memory. Was that 18 holes or 36 you had to play the Monday qualifying?
That was 18. It was just straight 18 holes, and you had to be one of the low ones or whatever the number was.
Okay, so now you're on tour, and you played in 15 events, and you made the cut in half of them. Yeah,
it was. Again, it was another perfect learning curve for me because, of course you're 24 years old and you think you're pretty good, but you don't know how good you are. And then you go to that next level, which was the tour. And then I used to realize again that I'm not even close to these guys. And it makes you realize that if you want to play at this level, you're going to have to figure something out, and you got to get better, and you got to keep working at it harder, or you've got to do something. So, after the second year, and I was getting ready to have for 1984, I made the decision to try to find a teacher because clearly something wasn't right, and I just wasn't able to keep up with these guys. And that's where I found Peter Costas, who's now, obviously everybody knows the name because he's with CBS and has been for, 25, 30 years now. But, back then he was just a, quote, normal teacher. And I'll never forget when I went to him, I said, Peter, I'm never going to question anything you tell me. I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to trust you. And I think that is one thing that any young kid who has a teacher needs to do, because we have a tendency to micromanage ourselves, especially in today's world with all the videos. So either trust your teacher or don't go to him at all. And in my case, Peter since had told me that he thought it would take me about 2 years to get the swing turned around. Because I'll never forget, he said, well, what are you trying to hit? I said, well, I'm trying to hit a little fades. He said, well, you're setting it, your stance and your setup is like you're playing for a draw, and I'm trying to hit fades. So you can see how I was always fighting myself.
Right.
So, he eventually changed it, and then things turned around well. I unfortunately lost my sponsors in 1984.
Who? Oh, they weren't
Well, they were all local people from Danbury. They were all. My Uncle Jack was kind of Bob Adams, Matt Adams, who's with the Golf Channel. His father was one of my original sponsors, and just other locals. And I understood. They'd been with me 3 years, and we really didn't make anything. We broke even 1 year, and we lost money the other year. So I got it. They gave me a great chance, and I'm always appreciative of that. But so I couldn't find any new sponsors, just no one in sight. And here it is January, and I've got my card, and there's nowhere for me to go. And I did something that is the weirdest thing that I've probably, I wouldn't say ever done, because I've done some weird things, but I placed some bets on some basketball games. And I hit 23 out of 24 games. And that's how I got my money to start up the 85 season. And ended up with, about 15,000, which back then was enough to get you going and see what happens from there. And that's how 1985 started.
Well, yeah, that was a big turning point, of course, in your career. And I remember everybody pulling for you. Of course, everybody's jumping up and down at Ridgewood Country Club. I'm now the assistant pro at the club, and any chance we got a chance to watch you on the weekends. I remember the Buick Open was your breakthrough, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah, it was Buick Open just outside Detroit. A course called Warwick Hills, and just no reason or rhyme. It's not like I felt like I had it that week, because I didn't. I bogeyed the very first hole to par 5, and then the weather alarm went off, and we went in for about 2 hours. I literally fell asleep on the bench in the locker room, and the locker room guy woke me up, and he's like, sir. I'm like, what? He says, they're starting, right? You gotta go. So I run out to the second tee, and I get there in time. I think I ended up making like 6 birdies and shoot 67. And then I think I shot another 67 and was really close to the lead, or it might have been 69. And then Saturday I shot 67. And here I am in the last group for the first time ever on Sunday.
And I remember that. I remember the 18th hole, and your sister was on the bag.
Yeah, it was wild because, you know, like we were talking the other day, I had a 4-shot lead with 2 to go, and I parred 17 at par 3. But I'm still, in my mind, this is not a done deal, that you could still screw up. Do not make a mental mistake.
Right.
And it was OB all the way down the left. So I just blow my tee shot down into the 9th fairway. I mean, it was 50 yards. It wasn't going left. And just kind of chunk one up there, and I chunk a chip. And at this point, I knew it was pretty much mine. Now, this is back in the day when they had the manual scoreboards. You know, they didn't have the electric ones that they do now.
Right.
And I'll never forget, my sister tended the flag, and the only thing I could see, because there was a hole in the scoreboard, because it was my score that hadn't been posted yet, and the sun was glaring in my eyes. I mean, glaring. I couldn't see the hole. I could barely see Shelly. I have like a 45-footer, and I'm like, well, I know it's a little left or right. I'll just whack it up there, and it goes in. I mean, it just...
We all jumped up on that one. Yep. And you won by 1 or 2 shots.
I won by 4.
Oh, you held it.
Yep. No, I had a 4-shot lead and somehow made that wacky par in the last hole. And so it was, it was really an awesome feeling because, you've been, fighting hard. This is what you've been dreaming about. This is what I've always thought about. And never once did I ever think that I would be anything but a golfer.
Right.
And, to finally say that you have won on the PGA Tour was like, all right, this is a good thing. And then, a few months, finished well on the money list and did well. And then a few months later, I went to Morocco and won the King Hassan Trophy. And so it's still my favorite trophy of all time, where they give us a dagger, crested with jewelry and emeralds and diamonds and all that. And it was just a great year. I mean, it was a really good start to where I had climbed to that next step, and now I thought I was thoroughly there, and it was just a question of how many more steps I could climb.
Give some of the younger players an idea of what first place money was back then as compared to today.
Yeah, I won $81,000. Which is, but back then we didn't really complain. We didn't know that eventually someday that athletes would be making what they're making now, whether it's the golf world or the baseball or whatever. A couple years later, I win a tournament, was the biggest money purse ever, and I won $225,000, which today would have been equivalent to $2 million.
Right.
So it's it's just two different worlds. But it's compared to Jack Nicklaus, I was playing for a lot.
Right, he was playing for. I remember in the '70s, that was first place was $45,000.
Yeah. So I mean, it's you're born when you're born.
So that takes us to 1986. Now, where was the Ryder Cup in all of this?
The Ryder Cup I made was 1989.
Okay. So
86 was a good year.
Good.
I won another tournament, finished high up on the money list, so I can't complain. I won the very first Castle Pines Stapleford event, and I again, you don't expect. I didn't have a really high flight ball, because it was who could adjust to the altitude the quickest and the fastest, because no one had really played there. And for me, it worked out really well. And, I think I shot 66 the last day and beat, I think it was Langer, who was my closest competitor. And it was, it was this another victory, which meant just more proof that I was getting better and better, and that I really did belong out there. I wasn't, a fluke, so to speak. Like, maybe some people thought I was just, he'll never win again. But it just helped me have more faith in myself that I was able to get to the next level, so to speak.
Right. And you just talked about ball flight. You had to adjust to the elevation in Colorado, but I also remember hearing, how many times did you play over at the Open? And in Scotland or England or wherever they played it. Did you play over there?
Yeah, I did. I believe I played 6 times over there. Back then we had it's a different qualifying than they do now. I don't know if many people remember, but the PGA Tour and the European Tour were fighting pretty hard against each other because the European hotshots thought they should be able to come over to our tour and play whenever they wanted. And we felt that we don't mind them playing here, but they need to also support it. You know, they only wanted to come and play 9 events, and we wanted them to play 12 or 15. And so we kept fighting it back and forth. So they didn't allow many of us the exempt status. Whereas now, you know, they go by the world rankings and all that. You get in these events easily. I probably would have played twice the many Opens as I did under today's system. But, you know, it was just, you know, that's just what was happening. You know, the Seve Ballesteros, the Nick Faldos, the Langers, who else was Ian Woosnam, and, you know, the 5 big honchos who I'm missing somebody.
Had to be Colin Montgomery, had to be right there.
Yeah, Colin was a little later, but there's one more stud muffin I'm missing. Jose Maria would have been there during that time, but I don't know, he might come to me. But it was, you know, Seve, and Sandy Lyle might have been the other one.
Sandy Lyle, there you go.
Yeah. And it, you know, so, you know, we all figured it out and straightened it out. And I think now the number is 15. I think we gave them 12 or 13, and they were just screaming bloody murder over that. And now they don't even think about 15.
Right. Yep. But the money's almost equal over there, or not?
Back then, it wasn't even really close. But those studs are getting appearance money. See, and that's the difference between our tour and their tours. They get appearance money, and so the power players have more power there, whereas the 5 power players in my era, you know, the Watson, the Nicklaus, and even Palmer still, you know, they had clout, but they weren't the final judge and jury. Over there, the top 5 basically ran the show. So it was a little trickier, and, you know, they're hurting over there now to some degree with this so-called, you know, global tour, which I'm not so sure is really a global tour except for China, where, you know, a lot of money is, obviously. But they're losing. Their purses are not even close to what today's PGA Tour is. And, you know, if they don't figure something out relatively quick, that tour could be in trouble.
Well, that brings us to 1987. Tell us about 1987.
87 was an interesting year. You know, I didn't win on tour, but I did win a non-sanctioned tour event, so to speak. A lot of tour players, but it wasn't given status. In January, out of Pebble Beach and Carmel Valley. So I was happy. I wasn't thrilled with the way I played, but, you know, I still won a tournament, and, you know, that was in an era when, you know, if you won 1 or 2 tournaments, if you won 2 tournaments in that era, you had a phenomenal year.
Right.
You know, there's just, if people go back and look at how many Hall of Famers are from my era, it's scary how many great players we had. And when you have that many really good players, it's going to be hard for anyone to dominate and win 4 or 5 times. It just didn't happen. Just all you got to do is look at the record. It's just no one won 4 or 5 times in the 80s. And even in the 90s until towards the back end of the 90s when things started separating again. But, you know, again, you're born when you're born. So, you know, who knows what's going to happen. And it, you know, 88 came about. You know, I thought life was good.
That was a big year. Yeah,
88 was clearly my best year. And you know, it's certainly a year I'll never forget. I just had everything going well. You know, I won 3 times.
Which ones did you win?
I won Milwaukee, the Canadian Open, back-to-back. I lost 2 playoffs. You know, I lost Westchester, which is, you know, local here, and I lost Greensboro. And then I finished 2nd in Pensacola, and then I won in Japan, which was the biggest money event in the tour at that in the world at that time. Right. You know, and it's funny because that particular tournament, you know, I had so-called studs, you know, where I was fighting up against Seve and Couples and Watson. So, you know, it's funny that people don't when they look back at my career, you know, they look at the 5 wins and they don't realize what, in my brain, I consider it 9 wins. And it, because, you know, there were some seriously good players, and, you know, beating Seve and Couples and Watson, how can you argue with that and not count that a win?
No. And I mean, I remember they said you were the hottest player in the world going into that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's
the hottest player in the world going into the fall. I remember that.
Yeah,
I think that came from Johnny Miller, I believe. Okay, so '88 was a big turnaround for you. I know that. And I mean, going back just for a moment to the Stableford, I don't think a lot of people realize that you and Curtis Strange were duking it out for the first player to win $1 million in a season. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was, you know, 1988 was also the very first year that they instituted the Tour Championship. And it was at Pebble Beach that particular year. And there was only 3 players that could cross the $1 million mark. It was either myself, Curtis Strange, or Tom Kite. And as it just so happened, all 3 of us were in contention going into the last day. And
I watched every minute of it.
I'll never forget it because, you know, Pebble Beach is Pebble Beach. Now, this is in October time or September. I don't remember when it was, but it was one of those 2 months. And out of nowhere comes this storm. You know, it's not like today where we have everything, you know, we know when it's coming. And if people can think about it, on the 10th hole, I hit driver. Now, that shows you how stupid and aggressive I was trying to hit driver into that green. And I couldn't even reach. So it made even less sense to hit it, but that's how I did it. I pitched up to about 1.5 feet. And there was a tour official just next to the green. And now the wind is blowing so hard that the rain is literally coming in sideways. And I go over to him and I said, we can't play. This is crazy. What are you guys doing? You know, it's just howling. We can't see what's going on. No, we're playing. You got to keep playing. So I get over my ball to, you know, get ready to, you know, basically tap in my 1.5 footer. And it, just as I'm taking the stroke, a gust of wind comes and knocks me off. So I literally missed the putt, and I missed it by inches. I mean, not like I just missed the cup. I missed it by inches. It wasn't even close. And it, you know, I am screaming mad at this point. Because as soon as I tapped the next one in, they blew the whistle. And I still say to this day, they knew that he was going to call it, and the guy waited intentionally because of my involvement with the Ping lawsuit. Because I was involved, I favored Ping against the tour in the lawsuit.
Was that the box grooves, the square grooves?
That was the square grooves issue. And Dean Beeman and Tim Finchem weren't so honest with the players and the officials. You know, they were basically just telling them lies that Carson was going to, you know, take their jobs from him. There was going to be no more tour, which was never even in his mind. That was not even a thought. And you'll never convince me that there wasn't malice against me with Finchem and Beeman. And if you look at my fines, 2/3 of my fines came within a 3.5 year period. And I'm not saying some of them I didn't deserve, because I certainly was an idiot enough times. And you know, but I've been fined. I'll give you one. I was fined on a Tuesday once. We're playing the PGA at Belle Reve. I think it was 1990. It's myself, Calc, Payne Stewart, and Couples. You know, we like to gamble, so we play our games and all that. And we're waiting on the 13th tee. And so there's a bunch of people around. So I walk down a little and start signing autographs. So some people are there, and, you know, somebody asked me, hey, what do you think of the course? And I look up and I said, hey, you a member? And he goes, no. I said, the course sucks. Everybody laughed, and that was that. Well, an official happened to be walking by at the time. So I get fined $1,000 for being the only guy on a Tuesday to get fined, much less signing autographs. I mean, they just didn't like me.
This is something that you would only know if you watched the tournament after the fact. But I watched you so many times, I saw things maybe you didn't see. I remember them intentionally misspelling your name on the leaderboard. And I also remember, again, you were in contention, and when the camera was on you and you're ready to play your shot, they go to somebody else.
Yeah.
All that stuff there, it was so obvious. It was, you know, I could imagine was hurtful.
It was unfortunate, and I mean, everyone's entitled to their views and their opinions, but I wish they had gotten their facts. I know it was, I think it was Frank Chirkanian. I think he was the big CBS guy back then, because obviously Peter had started working for them now, and Peter told me that Chirkanian would not show me unless he absolutely had to.
Yeah.
That he just hated you. Now, I never even met the guy, so I have no idea whether it was the tour and the lawsuit, or whether he just didn't like my openness or my style or just the way I have no idea, and I still don't know.
Yeah, it was pretty blatant and pretty obvious for the spectators that knew you and naturally were following you. So that takes us to 1989 now. You had a pretty good year in '89.
Yeah, I can't complain. Again, I win again. I get revenge at Greensboro for losing in the playoff the year before, so that felt really good. And then we played the Ryder Cup, which was just phenomenal. This was in an era when it's just as heated today, but it's more in a friendship way, because they're all good buddies now. When I tell you that half of the guys hated the other half, that's what it was. Again, it goes back to the fight we had with the European players, and when I say half, I'm talking about the studs of each era. And so it was more, real. I won't call it dislike, but just didn't like each other, if that makes sense. Yeah. A lot of people remember the Seve and Asinger, battle in '91, and it was just, it was more. There was a lot of, it was personal vengeance, so to speak, in wanting to win, along with representing the countries, of course.
Oh, did you play that in Europe, or did you play it in America?
We played it at the Belfry. Wow. We ended up tying, which I don't understand. That's the dumbest rule on the planet. Either have a playoff or don't say that the other team gets to retain the cup and wins the cup. I mean, when Tiger Woods or Jack were winning, they didn't say to them, "Hey, we're giving everybody else a shot, or two shots because you're beating everybody up." It makes no sense why we're giving them a half a point, whoever won the year before. But that's another argument on another day. And so we're going down to the last day, and it's pretty close. It's nip and tuck. I will never ever forget. I played really well that day. I think Kite was the only one more under par than me that day. And going to 18, I was playing Jose Maria Canizares, and we both hit good tee shots. I don't know if people remember, there was a lot of our Americans hit it in the water. And so we both hit good tee shots. The Belfry has a 3-tiered green and a bunker on the left and then water left. And he has a 2-iron in his hand. He probably had like 215 to the hole. I had 212. He just yanks the living crap out of this puppy. And I thought for sure it was going to go in the water, or at best case, bunker. Well, it hits the left slip of the bunker, and it had to have hit either a rock or a liner post, because it literally hit the lip and bounced onto the green. And it was like, well, that sucks. I mean, it was like, are you kidding me? And, so, okay, it is what it is. So I hit my shot. I'll never forget, I had a cleek railer. I think they just come out with like the cleeks, like kind of like maybe today's version of the hybrids, but they were brand spanking new. And I had 209 to carry this big tier and 212 to the hole. I flew it 209 and right at the pin. It was the top 2 shots I've ever hit under the gun. And it bounced straight up in the air, and I thought it was going to be a 5-footer. And it bounced up and comes down, and all of a sudden I see it going all the way down this hill. And it rolled all the way down to about 80 feet because it was a massive slope. I end up 3-putting because you got to beat it to get up the hill, because you can't leave it up top. You can't leave it on the bottom. And then he 2-putted, and that was the 16th or the 14th point, which meant the worst they could do is a tie, and the best we could do is a tie, which meant they, quote, retain the cup. So I got that. I won't call it an honor, but it's something that I'll never forget. That I gave up that last point, and it just goes to show you how golf is one of those kind of games where you can do what you think is something really well. Like I played really well. I could not have hit a better shot under the gun. It was just so good, and you walk away with a loss. I mean, that's what golf does to us. And anybody out there knows how many times if they hit that shot they thought was perfect, and goes in the bunker, goes in the water.
Yeah, it takes the wind out of you. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a great story there. So now, 1990 brings you to Hong Kong.
Yeah. 1990, I was offered a chance to go to Hong Kong. My year wasn't very good. I hadn't won on the tour, starting to have a lot of personal problems. But we went to Hong Kong, and as luck would have it, I was able to pull that one off. Again, I beat Langer down the stretch, and so I did get a win. So I was still happy that at least I won a tournament. Wasn't as thrilled with the way I played for the year, but little did I know at that time how much my personal problems were affecting your golf game. And when you're out there, you don't realize it. And I'm one of those kind of guys that's not going to blame X, Y, or Z. I just figure I got to play better. And it wasn't until a decade later did I realize what kind of effect all these personal problems have an effect on your game.
So that was kind of the lull in your life right there. And in 2003, you went back out to requalify for the tour.
Yeah. It was a long stretch. I mean, I fought through a pretty rough depression and all that kind of stuff, and it was to get back on tour. I think I was at that point 45. Got through the Q school, and was just really psyched about getting another chance to get out there and salvage the back end of my career, so to speak. And it was weird because I've never played well on the West Coast. I know everyone knows the expression, horses for horses. Johnny Miller, and out west, and Tom Watson never winning in the state of Florida. How does that happen? As great a player as he has been, it just that happens. And I had my best West Coast ever, and then I blow my back out and ended up having to take off the whole year and never got it back and lost my card, and they never saw me again.
I know I followed you through Q school, and I say, here we go again. It was a big layoff from 1990 to 3, that's for sure. So now you turn 50, and that brings us to 2008, and you decide to go get on the now Champions Tour.
Yeah, it was, like I said, I made the decision to literally not even try to play, hard professional golf for 3 years, to give my back a break. And no one would have thought that 50 was coming up and I would have a chance to get healthy again. And, Jeannie and myself could live out our, quote, days and not have to worry so much, because they're playing for more money on the senior tour than I played for when I was on the tour.
Yep.
So, the first few events, you're a little rusty, you're nervous, and you're just kind of settling in, which is normal for me. I always kind of do things in slow steps. And then, I think I only played four or five events in 08, because it's when your birthday falls. And then in 09 hits, and I start playing well, and things were really kicking in. Fact is, we were driving back from Austin, Texas, heading from a tournament, obviously, heading back to Greensboro, where we were, where Jeannie's lived.
That was your girlfriend?
That's my girlfriend. Yeah. Well, slash wife. We got married in the islands, but it's not honored in the U.S. So we never bothered to do it in the States. But so we were heading back, and I remember telling my brother and Jeannie before I went to lie down on the last drive we had.
And this was in the RV?
In the RV that we were traveling in. I told them, I said, we're going to be gold from here. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I just played two tournaments in a row without one demon. And so everything's back to normal. As soon as my game kicks in, we're going to win tons of tournaments. It'll all be good. And then I went back to lie down, and a day later I wake up after, the tire blows on the RV and we go crashing off the road. And, both, Billy and Jeannie died, and, my dog Nip, and it's another slap that you got to take. And then a couple days later, they had to take my leg, and it's one of those things. You gotta shake your head and you cry all you want, and you got to make a decision as to who are you going to let win. Are you going to let tragedy win, or are you going to fight for life? And I don't know if this is even a good way of explaining it, but I tell someone who's an atheist or believes in God, is that it doesn't matter whether you believe in God or you don't. It's still, are you want to fight for your life, or do you want to waste it? So my belief is to just keep fighting for life, and that's what I've been trying to do ever since.
Mm-hmm. So after the accident, obviously there was a long recovery time, and then came the Ben Hogan Award that you received. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, obviously, for people who don't know, the Ben Hogan Award is named after him because of his accident in the late 50s it was, and how he came back. So, it's basically for a comeback player. So they were nice enough to honor me with the Ben Hogan Award because I was playing, professional golf events, less than a year later, with the leg off and trying to figure it out. And, it means a lot to me simply because it shows me that I hadn't given up and I kept fighting, and that life is worth fighting for, whether it's through golf or whether it's through any other path that someone wants to find. And, that trophies is sitting with my trophies that I've won. So it meant a lot to me.
And you received that at the Masters Championship?
Right. Yep, that's when they give it out every year. Yep.
No, and that's an award that, that's very special, and not enough people, as far as I was concerned, knew about it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think they make the mistake, and this is just my opinion, but they give it out every year, and then maybe they shouldn't. Maybe it really they give it out if a guy comes back from just like a shoulder surgery or something, and in today's world that's not such a big deal, and I don't mean to sound that way, but if they waited for when more serious injuries or accidents and a guy fights back, I think maybe it would mean more. But when they just give it away every year, no matter what, I think that's when it gets kind of dragged down a little. But that's just my opinion. But although I think I'm right. But
well, I don't think it gets more serious than what happened to you, and then still go out and compete.
Right.
But it was very well deserved. All right. So our viewers, we started in Honduras, and we're going to finish up by ending with Honduras. And Kenny has a story that he's published in his book, and he'd like to share it with us. And before we begin, I just want to talk about your courage and your bravery and your candor. It's not easy to talk about. So
yeah, in my book, Hunter of Hope, a lot of people have been after me to write a book because so much has happened in my life, and there's tons of stories that obviously we haven't gotten in, and it's a book mixed with laughter, tragedy, inspiration. I'm told it hits all the emotions, and the decision I had to make was whether I wanted to tell everybody about what happened in Honduras. And about halfway through the first year down there, a very good friend of my mom and my father had moved down with us.
And you were 10 years old?
I was 11 when we first moved. And, you know, I didn't think anything much about it. I basically woke up one night when he was kind of playing with me. And he told me that he was given the honor by my parents of teaching me about love and sex and all. And I didn't think anything about it, to be perfectly honest with you.
And he was a stranger to you, but a friend of yours.
No, I mean, I knew him well. I mean, you know, he was like an uncle to us. I mean, you know, I didn't question him once. You know, and he told me that, you know, this is what happens in the world, and that, you know, we always keep it secret because it's a very hush-hush subject and all that. And like I said, I didn't think anything about it. You know, this is back in an era when there's no such thing as internet or, you know, really TV or anything. And so I didn't think anything. I didn't blink about it, to be honest with you.
You were not even an adolescent. You were still a little.
And it, you know, and then unfortunately, about a year later, things started turning ugly. He brought some other people into the picture. And that's when things kind of got really ugly and just really nasty games and stuff.
This happened in your own home?
In my home or other places, you know. Sometimes it happened at school. Sometimes, you know, just everywhere, basically where my mother wasn't. And then the last year, my mom was going to leave, you know, because my dad it was out of control basically, and they told me that I had to tell my mom that I was going to stay there with Dad, or they would kill him. And I believed them because I had tried once to get out of it, and they beat me pretty bad. I didn't have a broken bone to prove it. So, you know, I still don't understand to this day, because I came back in the summer and I went back that third year, and I don't know why I did it. I mean, you know, when I look at it now, how afraid I must have been. But, you know, I did. And then that third year, now that my mom was gone, now it happened at the house all the time. As soon as my dad would pass out, which was pretty much every night, things just got so bad. You know, it's not really something, you know, any kid should have to go through. I don't know if you want me to talk at all about that last night, but
it's up to you. It's up to you.
Well, I mean, a part of me's, if truth be told, a part of me's, I don't know how to take it, but things got really awful that night, and I was left outside, and the maid finally found me and cleaned me up. And then I went back to my room like I would all the time. And for some reason, the man decided to sleep in my bed, and I just kind of lost my marbles. I went outside and you know, picked up a rock and just kind of let him have it. You know, I had to I had to wake up my father out of his whatever he was in. He didn't know anything about it. He was mortified. He put me on a plane. And his last words to me were, kid, I'm sorry. You did nothing wrong. And don't ever tell a living soul. And so I never did. And until I decided to write this book, and I talked my whole life about being open and honest, and even though some of my friends didn't want me to tell that part of my life, I thought I would be so hypocritical of me not to talk about that, because little did I know at the time how much that has affected me as a person. When I came back to the States, I became a recluse, basically. I didn't have anything to do with people. It just, you become a different person. And I'm not saying I'm not a good person now, because I think I am a good person, but I think I would have been a different person. I still would be a good person, but I would be a different person than I am now. And so that's the main reason that I'm going to tell this story, because I want to try to get involved with an organization and where we can change some of the laws about pedophilia, because I don't think people realize how hardcore some of this stuff is. And that's why I go into some detail about the games that they used to play. And it's not just touchy-feely stuff that maybe some adults seem to think it is, or maybe, I don't know. I mean, I guess you'd have to ask adults as to, and I'm just as much to blame, because I've kept it secret for 50 years now. And, maybe I should open my mouth when I was more of a, star. Maybe I could have done something, but I don't know. I don't have an answer, but I'm hoping now that's what I can do. And that's one of the main reasons I wrote this book was for that, and try to make a difference, because it's, you're affected for life. You're no longer that whoever you were going to be, you are no longer. And even now I've gotten so many letters and phone calls from people that, some are older than me, that these things happened to, and they never told the soul, and they were going to go tell their spouse and their children. And, so it's because it's good. I'm not handling it as well as I thought I would. I guess, when you don't think about it that often for a long time, and then all of a sudden you're going to start spitting it all out, I guess it's a rush of all that pain and emotion and suffering you went through.
Kept it in for a long time, Ken.
And, part of me is afraid of how my friends are going to act, and, will they still be themselves around me? And, all these stupid things that get through your head, but this is what happens. I mean, I still blame myself for this whole thing.
I think that's extremely common. You're the one that you feel guilty. And I think that's pretty common with a lot of that stuff. And
yeah, that's what they say, but I blame myself. How could I have been so stupid they wouldn't have killed my mother. They wouldn't have killed my father, at least,
You
but
were 12 years old.
When you're 12, you don't know that, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know I don't know.
Well, Paul Azinger said you're the most courageous man he's ever met, or something close to that. And I don't think there's anybody watching tonight and that's going to see this even after tonight that wouldn't agree. And we're very, very thankful that you came on and shared that with us. I don't know if you've shared it with too many people, but we're very pleased that you came on tonight to do something as hard as that was, and to open yourself up like that. You should be applauded, and I know our viewers tonight are applauding you and thanking you. for doing that, because people do want to hear about this, and then other people could come forward and open up and not keep it in. And then,
Right. Well, that, like I said, that's my hope, but I can't do it if I can't get this story to go national and be a buzz news. I'll never be able to change any laws. So I'm only hoping we can get this out there, and and get the word flying, whether it's through my book or whether it's just through interviews. I don't care how it gets out there. I just got to get it out there.
Wouldn't it be great if we could get this to go viral? We'll do everything we can there. Speaking of your book, Kenny, where can we get your book? I ordered mine today. But where can we get your book?
Yeah, it's at kengreengolf.com. I'll sign every one of them, and you can write whatever you want, or I'll just sign what I want to sign, whatever anybody wants. And I do it all. I mean, just myself and Chris. And it's not like we have. I know we've called in a few people because we've had some errors on their orders, and they don't believe it's me calling. But I believe in if you're going to do it, do it.
Yep.
So that's what I do. So kengreengolf.com, and I'll answer every email, and I'll talk to anybody who ever wants to talk to me.
That's great. Now, are you ready to close, or is there anything else you'd like to finish with?
I'm pretty good right now, thanks.
I think we took it out of you a little bit, and I know you thought you were going to be tougher than you are, but when you talk about it, it all comes out.
It's like I said, I didn't expect this to hit me like it's been hitting me, but we'll get through it.
It's the real thing. So, that's going to wrap our show up tonight. But before we close, I always like to introduce our next guest. It's going to be next Thursday night. I've got former U.S. Amateur Champion, 1977 U.S. Amateur Champion, and two-time PGA Tour winner, John Fote. He's going to be joining us next week.
I played a lot with John.
I bet you did. It was almost the same era.
Yep.
So he's all excited about being our guest next week. And at this point right now, we just say goodnight. So thank you everybody for being here tonight. This was a very it's kind of a special kind of interview, and there wasn't any laughing. A lot of credit to Kenny for opening up like that. Again, it took a lot of courage, and he's been credited with that. He deserves every bit of it. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in, and thank you, Kenny, and good night to everybody. And
thank you, guys. Good night, everybody.
Thanks again, Kenny.
All right, buddy.
We'll talk soon.
You got it.